Hello everyone, this is Ashley Tucker. Thank you for joining me today. I have another Halloween card to share with you today, and this one has a bookmark that attaches to the front of the card. I have made this type of card on my channel before. It was quite a while ago and it wasn't a Halloween card, but if you're interested in checking out that card, I will put a link up top so that you can go check that out. I really like this card design because I'm a pretty big reader, so anytime I can incorporate a bookmark into my card design, I am a happy camper. I started this card by picking two different purple cardstocks. One of them is SUGARPLUM cardstock from Fawn, and the other one is Grapesicle cardstock from My Favorite Things. I then grabbed this bookmark die, which is from the Bookmark It set from Mama Elephant, and I cut that out of the Grapesicle cardstock, and now I'm cutting a circle out of the SUGARPLUM cardstock. And I'm not sure if you noticed this, but I have brand new cutting plates for my die cutting machine, and it's always really nice to use those brand new, super clean cutting plates. Right here, I'm cutting some white cardstock using two circle dies. I was planning on using a circular frame that these two circle dies made, but in the end, I only use the circle created by the smaller of the two circle dies. And just so you know, the circle die that I used to cut the SUGARPLUM cardstock was a 4-inch circle die, and the circle die that I used for the white piece is a 3.5-inch circle die. Here I have another piece of Grapesicle cardstock, and this one is cut to be the size of an A2 size card. So this is 4.25 by 5.5, and I'm going to create my own patterned background on this piece using some smaller stamps from a few different stamp sets. I'm stamping these with Versamark ink because I wanted the background to be pretty subtle. And as you can see, I'm using my MISTI tool. Now this could have been a lot quicker if I stamped these with acrylic blocks, but for these spider webs, I wanted to double stamp them so that the Versamark ink would be just a little bit darker. And in order to do that, I needed to use my MISTI tool. So I just put that stamp in my MISTI, and then I just move the paper around in the MISTI and line it up where I think that I want it to go and stamp it. It's not super measured, I'm just kind of eyeballing where this goes, but it creates a pattern and it's kind of hard to tell that it's not perfect. After I finished stamping that spiderweb stamp onto the A2 size panel, I then took the bookmark that I cut out with the die and I stamped the same pattern with the same stamp onto that using my MISTI tool. By the way, this spiderweb stamp comes from the Boo Crew stamp set from My Favorite Things. It's a really great little spiderweb stamp. I've gotten a lot of use out of it. I don't know if you have seen some of my photos for Halloween cards, but I've made my very own patterned paper from this stamp before on a 12 by 12 piece of paper so that I could use it for backgrounds for my cards for photography. Alright, so once I had all of those spiderwebs stamped, I grabbed an acrylic block and this tiny little skull stamp. This is from the Ghostly Greetings stamp set, which is a My Favorite Things stamp set, and I'm stamping that in between all of the spider webs. I didn't need to double stamp that one, so I just used an acrylic block, so the stamping goes a lot faster. To finish up this pattern, I grabbed this tiny little star stamp. This is from the same set that the spider web came from, and I'm just filling in any open spaces to really fill up that pattern. Once the background was done, I grabbed the pumpkin stamps that are in the Ghostly Greetings stamp set. There's 2 pumpkins in the set, but I want 3, so I stamped the smaller one twice. I stamped those with a Copic friendly black ink onto some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. I then grabbed one of the ghosts from the set. I could have stamped this at the same time as my pumpkins, but I didn't realize at first that I wanted him. But then I realized I wanted him for the bookmark, so I stamped him with the Copic friendly black ink. You can see at the top of the paper there where I did some quick testing of my orange Copic markers to try and find the perfect color combination for each of my pumpkins. My pumpkins do end up pretty similar in color, though I did try to change it up just a little bit for some variation. I have one that's a little bit lighter, one that's a little bit darker, and one that's right in the middle. Like I said though, in the end, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between them. They mostly look pretty similar. This first one that I'm coloring is the lighter of the three. I used the YR02, the YR04, and the YR07 for that one. And this next one is the one that's in the middle, and I used the YR04 and the YR07 and the YR68 for that one. The third pumpkin I actually didn't color on camera, but let me just tell you, I colored it exactly how I colored the middle pumpkin, except for I added a little E15 at the end to darken it up just slightly. I decided to give all of my pumpkins a glowing smile, so I used these two yellow colors to color the inside of the pumpkins. I'm never sure whether I want to color the stems on my pumpkins green or brown. I change it up all the time. I'm not sure which is technically right because when you look at real pumpkins, they're kind of brownish green, and it really depends on the pumpkin. So this time I went with some green stems. I was a little bit all over the place with the coloring on this ghost. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do when I went into the coloring for this because it's white. It's supposed to be white. It's a ghost. But I wanted to give it some color. I didn't want it to be plain old white. So I kind of gave it a purpley blue hue using some really, really light blues and purples. And I actually liked the way that it turned out in the end. I wasn't sure about it. I thought I might end up having to restamp it and recolor it. But once I finished with it, I kind of liked it. Kind of has this spectral look to it. I cut those out with the coordinating dies, and then I grabbed a sentiment from the Ghostly Greetings stamp set, and I'm stamping that onto the white circle that I cut out earlier with some Versafine Onyx Black ink. I then used my tape runner to adhere that circle onto the SUGARPLUM circle that I cut out so that I have a nice purple border around the edge. For the two smaller pumpkins that I colored, I'm adhering them with some liquid adhesive and I'm putting them off to the side. And then I'm going to take the larger pumpkin and I'm going to use foam tape to pop it up and give it some dimension. And I'll put that right in the center of the two smaller ones. For some reason, I don't know why I decided to do this. It was kind of a spur of the moment decision, but I'm glad that I did it because I think it kind of gives it a whimsical look. But I used a Micron pen and I added these little curly vines that you sometimes see with jack-o'-lanterns. And I did draw those with a pencil first and then went over them with the pen so that I could have a guide. Right here, you see that I lined up the circle on top of the card, and it's kind of hard to see, but underneath that, I do have the bookmark that I cut out, and I put that right in the center and taped it down with some Post-it tape. And then I traced with pencil around that circle so that I could see exactly where it's going to hit so that I could place this foam tape. I wanted this foam tape to be hidden behind that circle, and I also wanted it to be on the sides of the bookmark, not touching the bookmark, but right close up against it, so the bookmark has a space to sit in between the two pieces. Once I had that tape on, I took the bookmark off and I just kind of tested the foam tape spacing to make sure that that bookmark slides in there and doesn't catch on anything. And if it doesn't catch on anything, then I know that those are good placements for the foam tape. As you can see, I was happy with the way that that bookmark was sliding, so I took the backing tape off of the foam tape, very carefully lined up that circle on the front of the panel, and then pressed it down. Alright, so now I'm going to start working a little bit more on my bookmark. I have this stamp, which is from the Goodreads stamp set from Mama Elephant. It's an oldie but a goodie. I use it all the time for bookmarks. And I stamped that with Versafine Onyx Black ink, cut it down into a strip, and then adhered it to the front of my bookmark. I grabbed the ghost that I colored in earlier, and I'm adhering that right above the strip with some liquid adhesive. Now, I was looking at that ghost and I thought that the mouth and the eyes looked a little bit faded and I wanted them to be nice and dark, so I grabbed a Micron pen and I just filled them in. Next, I grabbed another sentiment from the Itty Bitty Boos stamp set, which is from My Favorite Things. And this one just says Boo, and it's really tiny. And I stamped that 3 times around my ghost with Versafine Onyx Black ink, so it kind of looks like he's saying Boo. This next step is completely optional. I could have skipped it, but I decided I wanted to ground my pumpkins, and I did that by just creating a shadow underneath them with 2 different colors of gray Copic markers. At this point, I grabbed my eraser and I erased those pencil lines that I used for the vines. I wanted to give the ink from the pen plenty of time to dry so that I didn't smudge it at all, because that would have been really sad. Next, I grabbed my white gel pen. This is the number 8 gel pen, and I'm adding some highlights to my pumpkins, and I also added little dots on the insides of the pumpkins to try and make it look like it's glowing or sparkling. I really like the effect that gave. Alright, so now I'm going to create the tassel for my bookmark, and for this I'm going to use some pieces of embroidery floss. I have 2 pieces of yellow floss and 2 pieces of orange floss, and I folded them in half and created this loop, and then I'm going to push this loop through the hole on the top of the bookmark. I then grab that loop, making sure not to lose that loop hole, and then I grab the other end of the floss and push it through that hole to create my little knot. This isn't a super strong knot, so you also need to tie the end. So figure out how long you want your tassel to be, and then tie a knot on the end, and then trim it down with some scissors. Now, I don't have a link for this embroidery floss down below. I have links for most of the things that I use in my video, but I just don't know exactly where I got this. But I would recommend checking out your local craft store. You'll probably be able to find some there. Next, I wanted to add some sparkle, so I took my Wink of Stella glitter brush and I added some sparkle to the ghost and also to the insides of the pumpkins. I was very careful to add it to the inside of the pumpkins because I used white gel pen there, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't smudge the gel pen. This next step, honestly, I'm not completely sure about. I don't know if I like this or not, but I decided to take a Copic marker and add some dots to the background. I think these dots were just a little bit too dark. It might have worked a little bit better if I used a slightly lighter Copic marker. I don't hate the way that it looks, but I'm also not completely in love with it. The last step for this card was to add some sequins across the card. I kind of added them diagonally across the whole card, and I used purple and silver sequins and a few star sequins and gems, kind of just really mixed it up, and I really like the way that finishes the whole card off. And here's a look at the card totally done, and you can see how the bookmark works with the card. It just slides right out, and then you can also slide it right back in when you're ready to give it to a friend. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you really enjoyed today's card design and that it gave you some inspiration and ideas for your own cards. Like I said earlier, if you're looking for one of the products that I used in this video, most of them are down in the description so that you can find them easily. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time.